Aha, you're not supposed to hear that. Let me mute that microphone. Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Coffee and Headlines. Today is Friday, September 11, and you are here at our daily get together live on Facebook every single day of the week where we exchange topics, ideas, headlines, comments, suggestions, and all kinds of tips to make our lives here in Puerto Vallarta better, fuller, as an English speaking community. Today, we're going to have an amazing show because we have all kinds of juicy and shady news to share. And we also have a very important segment that I've called the brief and shady history of Mexico. We've been talking about great content about Mexico in light of the fact that this is our Mexican Independence Month, and we're going to continue to do that today with this awesome little thingamabobby that I've put together. If you are new to these broadcasts, my name is Paco Ojeda, and we'd love to hear that you're new, and you can let us know by just writing the word new in your comment, and that way we will give you the proper welcome. And also, if you have any specific comments or questions, it helps us a lot if you write the letter Q before your comment. That way we can make sure to try as best as possible to get to it during the broadcast. And if not, shortly thereafter. As always, it's great to see familiar faces. Linda says, I want to learn to take notes like that. Check it out. We were not supposed to hear. Yes, I know. I have, for some reason, my microphones are muting on and off, and I'm trying to figure out what on earth that is about. And I started broadcasting this morning with my microphone on, and that was really funny. Well, it was funny for me anyway. Let's take a quick look at your comments. You are everywhere, and that is wonderful. I am here. I just took a little longer today pushing all the right buttons. Let's see. I think we're all pretty much here. So we're going to get started. Of course, today we have highlights. Our mayor, the city mayor, has given his fifth address to the city about his accomplishments and projects that are coming up. We're going to take a look at a few talking points from his address. We're going to take a look at what happened with, now she has a lady name, Lady Argentina, this dreadful woman who decided to verbally abuse another woman and her boyfriend, husband, partner, whatever, who also used his hand to attack a person that was holding the camera. We're going to learn some headlines about and some updates about the cannabis law in Mexico and other interesting things. So, because there's a lot to chew on and it's Friday and we're all itching to get on with our weekend, I am just going to get this thing started. Let's go for it. So, as I mentioned in the intro, our mayor, Arturo Dávalos, delivered his fifth annual informe or formal address to the citizenship of Puerto Vallarta. This is, just as a reminder, his second term in office. He was reelected and he's reaching the end of his term. So, this is the part of his tenure in which he announces a lot of wonderful things that he's done and so forth and so on. But he also announces things that are coming up that are supposed to either get started or end or get concluded before his administration is over. And so we're going to look at a few headlines related to this. Of course, one of the things that is coming up is how there are already 130 approved projects in City Hall that are going to be continued before his tenure is over. A couple of these jumped my eye because they have to do with street remodelings, like what is going on in Francisco Medina Asensio. There's also more remodeling scheduled for Avenida Mexico. And we finally get some clarity about the fact that streets Francia and Niza in Colonia Versalles are going to be intervened and improved. We've been looking at Calle Francia, the main throughway in Versalles, and just waiting to see when the government would actually get started with this. So I'm very excited about this. There's also news of more walking paths along the Rio Quale in Colonia Emiliano Zapata, and so forth and so on. This one that I'm going to show you next caught my eyes. It was shared by a viewer. By a regular viewer, and it looks like an April Fool's headline, but apparently they are going to build, what do you call these things? Scenic chingadera that is going to go from Hotel Rosita to the monument of La Cruz up on the mountains behind Gringo Gulch. And apparently this is going to happen. It's an enormous tourism attraction that the city wants to promote. And they're also looking at formalizing, finally, they've been talking about this forever, water taxis going from Puerto Vallarta to Punta de Mita. This is a trip that now takes as much as 2 hours when you're driving because of all the traffic. And if you were to get there by boat, you could be in Punta de Mita in 30 minutes, says this headline. In addition, the mayor announced 2 more malecons in Puerto Vallarta. One of them is going to be built in Boca de Tomatlan, and another one is going to be built in Mismaloya. And there will be an extension for the Puerto Vallarta Malecon that is going to go all the way up to the Sheraton Hotel. Thank you for that, Sean. I was looking for the word gondola. Thank you, gondola. It's a great word, and I would tell you why, but it's a great word because of a complicated reason that has to do with a Spanish movie that, never mind. I won't even have enough time to tell you why I think it's an awesome word. There's a quick question here. Do I actually feel the water taxi will proceed soon? You know, Lorraine, they've been talking about a water taxi from Puerto Vallarta to Punta Mita ever since I moved here 18 years ago. And every year on Mexican April Fool's Day, you see it's very common for newspapers to put out headlines that are that look formal and real, but they are actually fake news. And one of the ones that comes back every single year is new water taxi will, they actually call it the new monorail from Puerto Vallarta to Punta de Mita will be constructed. So are they going to do it soon? I don't know. I mean, these are promises that our politicians make, and it would be so wonderful if they actually continue to work on this and actually got it done. Another headline related to the mayor's statements has to do with a crocodile um, zoo that is going to be built in conjunction with the university and in conjunction with Vidanta, even though Vidanta is located in the Nayarit side of the Ameca River. Apparently, this is going to be located on the Puerto Vallarta site. I don't know exactly where, but they mention the Boca Negra estuary, which is in Boca de Tomates. So this might be a place where this will be built. Mayor Dávalos also announced a certain case of corruption with Ciapal, the company that handles our waterworks. And there's corruption for 2,199 million pesos. And he is actually saying that the proper reports and filings will be made so that we can find out where this money went. Again, we are going to have to wait and see how this progresses. In other important news, there's a question here. Julie Bunker asks, is there an update on the Rio Orcones situation? Not that I know of, Julie. I haven't seen any headlines to that effect. So if I see any headlines to that effect, you'll be the first to know because these are important headlines. Let me continue with this. This was a little bit upsetting, and it feels a little strange that yesterday, Hugo Lin Almada, who's the news director for news at CPS Media, the company that owns the former Vallarta Tribune, he was reported as having disappeared by his family. Apparently, he was last seen on Wednesday around 6:30 in the afternoon, and then he disappeared on his car, and nobody knew exactly where he went. And 24 hours later, he reappeared and made a shady statement, saying, "Dear friends, I appreciate your concern. I spent several hours in an introspective exercise that has helped me balance my present and future life. I worried my family and friends for not letting them know, and I apologize." So he didn't even tell his wife. So we don't know exactly what happened. It just looks pretty strange and shady. But bottom line, he is a reporter, and we are glad to know that he is doing fine. The dry law announced for Nayarit is useless, says local business people, and they asked the governor to reconsider. As we reported yesterday, the governor announced that from the 13th to the 17th, you would not be able to buy alcohol in Nayarit. Apparently, the business community is saying that this is of no consequence, and it is just going to end up damaging businesses because people will go out and find ways to drink anyway. So the governor has spoken. We don't know if he will change his mind, but as it stands, please keep in mind again that if you're in Nayarit from the 13th to the 17th of September, you will not be able to purchase alcohol in the entire state. So do your shopping. Do your shopping if having enough booze this week is important to you. This is good news, the new chancla law, and I'm glad that you're watching, Logan, because Logan has a dog that I baptized as chancla. A chancla, as you know, is a Mexican sandal, and the new chanclazo law makes parents that use physical violence like a belt or a shoe to hit their children, they could be sent for up to 5 years. They could be sent to jail for up to 5 years. And this is a new law that is going to be implemented in the state of Jalisco. I am not sure that it is going to be a nationwide law, but I'm very happy to see that it is at least going to be implemented here. It is quite common, unfortunately, for Mexican parents, and I can attest to that. I was there. My father used his belt to discipline us, and he was not humble in his use of the belt when we were kids. So if you are a parent and you're used to scolding your children with physical violence, whether it's slapping them or using a shoe or using a belt to scold them, you can go to jail, and I'll be very happy if you do. Abuse of that kind with children is simply not not a nice thing. Um, I am looking at some of your comments, and I'll get to them in a second. But first, I want to let you know that occupation in Puerto Vallarta, hotel occupation, is continue to rise. During the month of August, we reached up to 33.9 average. And of course, now that we're moving into the month of September, and hotels have an authorization of 50% capacity, we only hope um, that 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 occupation will continue to increase in local hotels. Let me take a break here for a second to make sure that I am not missing any fun and interesting comments, because sometimes you guys have really awesome conversations while I'm just blah blah blahing, and I'm not complaining. I think it's great that you're all conversing, but sometimes I miss some of the fun stuff, and I hate missing um, the fun stuff. Bam, 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 bam. The monorail will arrive right after the Guadalajara highway is finished. Well, yes, we have to laugh about these things, Mushi, because they keep announcing them, and um, we don't know exactly when these things are going to happen. Paul comments, mistress could be. Carmen mentions more water traffic, and she has a point. Something that us locals know is that waters are choppier for some reason in the northern part of the bay than in the southern part of the bay. So it would require a more formal type of vessel, not just a basic panga, to make this happen. And I certainly hope that um, the government is taking this into consideration. You'd think they would, but then again, we've been surprised in the past. Logan thinks it was ayahuasca. Paul thinks it was a hooker. Um, William questions laws that are enforced. Welcome to planet Earth. Ba, 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 ba. David says, my daddy, we've never gotten out of prison. Welcome to my club. And let's see what else we have. Uh, Feel free to still hit each other with your flip flops. No, 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 no. That's not nice. Um, Question: how do we know as tourists that hotels are cleaning and disinfecting enough, especially coming for a couple of months? Um, well, Sherry, you'd have to ask the hotels, and you'd have to ask. I mean, the hotels have to answer that question. We cannot police, and we are not the hotel police. So, if you have serious concern and you're going to a hotel, then you need to get in touch with the hotel and ask them specifically, what are you doing to make sure that I am safe during my stay? Dun, 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 dun. Okay, so let's go back to headlines, and we move into Lady Argentina. Yesterday, we reported about this in reference to a Mexican traditional song. There is one where the singer must hold a lengthy high note. What is the title? Robert, let me get into that in a second. There are several. There are several songs, and one of those is Malagueña, and it's not a must because the song doesn't specify singers. Showcase your talent. It's singers and their "I can do this better than you" attitude who choose to extend that high note that you're thinking about, and it's usually held during the phrase "Eres linda y hechicera." But let me continue with the news. Here we go. Boom. So Lady Argentina started as an anonymous couple that called a Mexican woman filthy Indian or something like that. Well, they were identified in social media as a couple, Julieta Barrio Nuevo and her partner Alejandro Montes de Oca, who apparently work in a bar in Mexico City teaching Argentinian dancing. She went as far as to mocking the reaction of people uh, being offended by what she said. So, aside from the fact that she called the woman an ugly Indian, she went and laughed at it. Well, that didn't go over too well. For starters, where is this? For starters, the Argentinian embassy got in the business, and the Argentinian embassy issued a statement saying, we denounce any kind of discrimination expression. And then the immigration department in Mexico decided, we're going to go after these guys. And then the federal attorney's office decided, well, we're also going to go into researching who these people are. Even Mexican ex-president Felipe Calderon went onto his Twitter account and he said, let's kick them out of the country. Well, that's what you get when you do something stupid like that. And finally, Lady Argentina came out and published a statement saying, well, these words just came out of my mouth. I didn't mean to be offensive, and my partner's hand didn't mean to hit the woman holding the camera. The hand just happened to move quickly. Isn't that convenient? So we don't know exactly what's going to happen with these people, but that's what you get when doing something stupid and being caught in front of the camera. Vallarta tribute owner not happy with that guy. If you're a business owner here and paid for a year ad subscription before they close, you can probably relate. Well, yes, there's been all kinds of horror stories of advertisers that used to be advertisers on the Vallarta Tribune, and when the owner of the company arbitrarily decided, well, we're not going to publish anymore, they left a number of advertisers in the dark, being owed money. And with ads that never appeared, the company attempted, as far as I know, to exchange the outstanding ads with television spots. And a lot of advertisers said, well, television spots do not serve us well because our viewers or our clients do not watch your channel. And it continues to be one of those unfortunate situations. So we'll see what happens with the whole Tribune / CPS media shadiness. Speaking of shadiness, let's move on to the weather and the leisurely stuff, because we get closer to our shady history of Mexico. Bam! Oh, hold on. There she is. Carrot weather. Sorry, this rain isn't strong enough to wash your sins away, says Carrot weather today. It's 25 degrees Fahrenheit. It is, 25 degrees Celsius. It is 77 degrees Fahrenheit. It feels like 29 degrees. Humidity is at 100%, and we now have a 37% chance of rain. So chances are that we are going to continue to have rain today. Let's check the weather forecast. We're going to start again with more rain in the evening today, Friday. Tomorrow, we will continue to have rain in the evening until morning, starting again in the evening. And Sunday, possible light rain overnight. And that is what the weather looks like for the next few days. Let me take a quick look at a couple of questions. When will I take another video walk in town? When I finish editing the video walks that I am presently involved in. I haven't finished editing my Versailles 3 walk, and after that I have to ask you, where would you like me to go walking about town for my next video? If you have any comments, please feel free to share them with me. Terry asks, how are the plans for tequila and headlines? So far, the only thing I have thought of doing is broadcasting in the afternoon and drinking tequila and getting tipsy real time so that I can watch the broadcast the next day and feel really embarrassed about it. Other than that, I don't know exactly what we're going to do, but I will let you know. I'm going to be meeting with my partner in crime, Paul, this afternoon or hopefully tomorrow to find out what kind of evil plan we can come up with. And speaking of evil, well, there's nothing evil about this, but it just sounded like a good transition. Yesterday was the latest deadline in which the federal government needed to let us know what is going on with the legislation of cannabis for medical use. And of course, the deadline came and went. and nothing was published in Mexico's Diario Oficial, which is where all the new changes in legislature are published to make them become law and to make them become factual. I would imagine we're going to continue looking at this headline, and reporters known to ask questions like this are going to continue to grill our president and our governor along the lines of, so where are the laws? Meanwhile, Vicente Fox, former president of Mexico, is putting himself in the right track to associate with a Nuevo León company, that Nuevo León being a northern state of Mexico, to launch some 400 stores throughout the country to sell cannabis products as soon as the legislation is put into place. There is a business in Mexico, in Monterrey rather, the capital city of Nuevo León, that already has 10 branches in place. Not that you can legally buy cannabis products just yet, but clearly the ex-president of Mexico, Vicente Fox, has decided to put himself in the right position on the chess game, shall we say. And we have to continue to see how this whole legislation business comes into place. In the meantime, we can all continue enjoying all those very strange and exotic candies that our friends from north of the border sometimes bring in their suitcases and sometimes share with us locals. I have been grateful to receive a couple of those gadgets and lollipops and popsicles, and good heavens, what a strange world the United States has become. Strange and wonderful ever since cannabis was legalized. But that's just me. Never mind. Several states connected to Jalisco have launched a Viaja en Corto, or take a short trip, campaign to stimulate tourism along the states of Aguascalientes, Guanajuato, Jalisco, Querétaro, San Luis Potosí, and Zacatecas. What are they looking at? They're looking at the fact that you can get from one state to the other in anything from 1.5 hours to 4 hours, giving you an opportunity to really get to know a lot of tourism destinations in, say, a weekend or things like that. So we have to see how this campaign is going to affect us, hopefully positively, with more people choosing to drive from one state to the other, and strengthen our tourism economy. I also have two more headlines that I want to share with you before we get into questions and our final feature. The first one has to do with this headline that I shared with you about the mammoths that appeared in the airport site. I found a long article in English that I want to share with you, so that you can take a closer look at what's going on if you're curious about it. And of course, as every Friday, we try to synchronize our headlines with the New York Times, and the New York Times again shows us 7 things to do this weekend. And let's see, before we get into our piece de resistance, let me take a look at your final comments. Beam, barum, bam, beam, bam, boom. Sheila has got her tequila and coffee ready for September 15th. I wouldn't combine tequila and coffee, but, have a blast. Let's see. Mushi loves the walks. I do too. Joe wants to see Marina Vallarta. Kathleen wants to see walk in Pitillan in the Botanical Garden. Have I considered a tequila tasting and headline? We are considering all kinds of things, but we're also mindful of the fact that rain can be unpredictable this time of year, and of course we are more inclined to host. We're looking at actually more than a tequila tasting. We're looking at a Mexican wine tasting. And it would have to be outdoors just to make people feel safe at showing up. But of course, doing something outdoors has something to do with the fact that this time of year, rain can be very unpredictable. So we would hate to schedule something wonderful and then realize that it gets busted because of the rain. But it's definitely something that we would consider doing. coffee, cannabis, and headlines. Well, if I didn't get so stupid when I get high, we would have that every single day. But I'm one of those people that cannot consume and still remain coherent. For me, consumption has everything to do with either sleeping well or watching a good movie on television or on Netflix. And very, very okay. Well, never mind. I was going to say very occasionally, but I haven't. It just hasn't happened. I don't want to go there. No physical contact with pandemic right now. Sheila wants walking tour of El Centro and our Cinco de Diciembre. Cinco de Diciembre is on my list because all of a sudden there's all these businesses and restaurants and great stuff going on. There's the fish market. Oh my God, you're totally in sync with me. I walk up to the Mirador. That's something else that I've been wanting to do. A beach walk highlighting restaurants and bars. What beach are you thinking of, Paula? There are so many of them. And so many beaches. Well, there's all kinds of great suggestions here for upcoming activities. This is really, really wonderful. It makes me very happy. Fred asks me, where are my other walk videos? Well, they are in past broadcasts, but I have been in the process of putting them up on Facebook and also on YouTube. As soon as I have them properly identified, you'll be the first to know. And now it is time to get into our mostly daily, now labeled Viva Mexico segment. And today we are going to take a quick course on Mexican history. So recess is over. Gather around. It's time to go back to the classroom. We are going to tackle Mexican history 101, because before we talk about some of the specific moments in Mexican history that we've been talking about or that we will be talking about, I thought it would be helpful to put a little bit of perspective as to where the whole thing started and where Mexicans came from and all that good stuff. And we didn't come from a nopal and we didn't come from a cactus. We came from, well, from the same place that other civilizations in America came from. So without further ado, we are going to tackle a quick, shady Mexican history. It all started, of course, with, let me get this going, boom. It all started with the last ice age. And just for perspective, we have to put this date up there. 40,000 years before the Common Era is when the last age ends and us human beings start getting our act together as human beings. That would take quite a few thousands of years because we know that the oldest human remains found in Mexico date from 11,500 years before the Common Era. Then we also know that the land bridge to Siberia went underwater around 8,000 years before the Common Era. So everyone or anyone that got to America through that place happened to do that way back then. So this is, of course, before the American colonies were settled, duh. But then we continue forward and we look at the earliest evidence that of any kind of art in Mexico comes from the year 7,500 before the Common Era. There are a series of cave art depictions found in the central part of the Baja California Peninsula. And it is not just a single place. There's a whole mountain stretch that has a number of caves that coincidentally have art that comes from the same period. After that, we find that there's evidence of agriculture in our country at Tehuacan, dating back to 5,000 years before the Common Era. This is the earliest place where we have found that the people of that period had domesticated corn and were actually harvesting it in a systematic format. After that, we go on to the first evidence of pottery in Mexico, which appears on the year 2000 before the Common Era. And we move forward to Another important development, terracing and chinampas. Chinampas are floating gardens. They're actually not floating per se, although some floating gardens might have been built. But this is an agricultural system that continues to be used to this date in Mexico, in which you have these garden plots that are surrounded by water canals. And this is something that goes back to the year 1500 before the Common Era, and continues to be used to this date. If you go to Mexico City and you take a boat ride in Xochimilco, what you're doing is you're going through canals that are surrounding chinampas. But this chinampa business will become extremely important in the future once we get to the time in which the Aztecs take over Tenochtitlan, now Mexico City. And we'll get to that in a second. Quite a few years, but in a second here. The oldest evidence of Mexicans or early citizens of Mexico playing a ball game comes from 1400 before the Common Era. Let us remember for a second that rubber was discovered in Mexico, and these ancient rubber balls, which were really hard, actually, there is evidence of the people, the natives, playing ball games in a court in Chiapas on the Gulf of Tehuantepec. And there are people that recreate this kind of ball game nowadays, especially the Maya cultures. And it is a very aggressive game that used to be played. And it deserves its whole segment on its own. We can talk about that at some point. Then we move to 1300 before the Common Era. Lake Texcoco, which is the basin over which Mexico City was built. As the lake has dried through the years, these figurines were found, hundreds of them, that feature Olmec iconography. Some of them have distorted faces. There are some very sexual ones. And there's a bunch of them, and you can enjoy them. You can see them at the Mexico City Anthropology Museum, and these date back to 1300 BCE. Then we have the beginning of the Olmec culture, which started in the year 1200 BCE. They were the earliest major Mesoamerican civilization known, and I've seen that face. It's taller than me, and I've slapped its cheeks. It sits at the Mexico City Anthropology Museum, and any first-timer visitor to Mexico City that does not schedule a visit to this important, wonderful museum should be shamed forever. But not now. The Mayan civilization started to form around 1000 BCE, and of course, there is a settlement of the Olmecs in La Venta, which is in the present-day Mexican state of Tabasco, where the oldest writing is found in Mexico. It comes from 900 BCE. So we already had writing at that point in time. If you're bored, let me know, and I can stop doing this. I find it fascinating myself. The beginning of the Zapotec culture dates from 700 BCE, and they come from Oaxaca. There is an archaeological site at Monte Alban, which continues to be a very, very popular tourism destination. It was one of the first major cities in Mesoamerica. The Maya built the first pyramids 100 years before the Common Era, and the Pyramid of the Sun was constructed in Teotihuacan between the years 150 and 450. But who built the Pyramid of the Sun? This is a shady moment in history, because we think about the Teotihuacan pyramids as the Aztec pyramids, but wait a second, the Aztecs didn't come into the picture for another 1,000 years. So who built the damn things? Shady spot, and we'll get to that in a second. But first, the Toltec Empire. The Toltec Empire dominates much of central Mexico between 900 and 1100, and the Aztecs, who haven't even come into the picture, saw the Toltecs as their intellectual and cultural predecessors. Where were the Aztecs? Well, they were still gathering force and getting their act together in northern Mexico. They are still known as the Mexica, and we have not even seen them just yet. But let's get the rumor mill started, because it was in 1325 that the Aztecs found Tenochtitlan. And we refer to this iconic image, the national emblem of an eagle standing on top of a cactus in the middle of a lake devouring a serpent. Did this actually happen, or did it not? Well, we're going to devote an entire segment to this particular fact, because we tend to think of the Aztecs as these gloriously dressed feather creatures that we see dancing on the Malecon, and they just came and decided, oh, here's a huge empty lake, and in the middle of the lake there's this little chinampa, floating garden, or this little island, and we are going to build our city here. And in fact, Mexico City was built over the lake, but we'll get into that in a second. The part that is shady about all of this is, if the Aztecs came after the Pyramid of the Sun was built, who built the pyramid? And when the Aztecs came, why do we have no history or no records of what happened before they arrived? We'll get to that at some point in the next couple of days, because these Aztecs, and let me tell you, they were shady people, and we don't remember them as shady, but don't get me started. We'll have time to dive into this later on. Oh my God, we're only at the Aztec Empire. We still have, what, 600 years to go? Okay. Moctezuma first becomes leader of the Aztecs and expands the Aztec Empire in the year 1440. He was the second Aztec emperor and fifth king of Tenochtitlan. He should not be confused with Moctezuma II, who came later, and he was the one that got all messed up with the Spaniards. Speaking of Spaniards, Christopher Columbus made his first trip to America in 1492. In Mexico, we celebrate October the 12th as Columbus Day, but he actually didn't land in Mexico. He landed in Bahamas in an island called Wanahani. And it was a few years later that Hernan Cortes left Cuba for Mexico. He was a Spanish conquistador who led an expedition that caused the fall of the Aztec Empire. Whereas Columbus was more of an explorer, Hernan Cortes was more of a conqueror. And he caused all kinds of horrible things to happen, but we get to that shortly. Of course, Hernan Cortes arrives in Tenochtitlan. He was received peacefully by Moctezuma II, but the Spaniards had, in the process of arriving from the Yucatan to Mexico City, the Spaniards had amassed quite a sizable army, including allies with other indigenous tribes that figured we might as well, get in with these shady people because they seem to have their act together. So by the time Hernan Cortes arrives in Tenochtitlan, he doesn't have good intentions. Moctezuma II is killed, and the city was destroyed. Shameful, shameful. There was a specific incident that is very well recorded in history, and this is the Temple Massacre, and it took place on May the 20th, 1520. Apparently, the Aztec noblemen, who were already feeling the brunt of all these Spaniards hanging around in Tenochtitlan, the nice Aztec noblemen asked for permission to hold a traditional festival, and the Spaniards agreed. What is the word? Hesitantly, because the Spaniards were thinking, well, we think these Aztec noblemen are really planning a rebellion. But were they planning a rebellion, or did the Spaniards all see all the shitload of gold that the Aztec noblemen used to employ in their ceremonial activity? So we don't know if the Aztecs were rebelling, or we don't know if the Spaniards saw the gold and we said, fuck this, and then said, fuck this, we want all this gold to ourselves. But there was a massacre, and thousands of Aztec people were killed by the Spaniards at this time. Not nice. So by 1521, the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan was conquered. Cortes was appointed governor, and he became the Grand Lord of New Spain, Nueva España, the following year. So we are now under the ruling of the Spaniards. 1521. And this lasted for quite a few centuries. So then, if you wonder why Mexicans react violently to other cultures like those from north of the border coming in and telling us how to do things and how to run our country, and when I've told you before that Mexicans, we carry this oppression gene that reacts violently to people coming from other places telling us how to live, trust me, it is real, and it goes back to the oppression that we felt from the Spaniards, and we have not been able to find enough talk therapy to get over it. Not yet. 1531, the Virgin of Guadalupe had a short run near Mexico City with 5 performances. 5 Marian apparitions took place on December, including a venerated image on a cloak enshrined within the Mexico City Basilica. Did this really happen, or did this not? Well, this is a dangerous spot because we know that the Virgin of Guadalupe has a huge ranking in Mexico, but we will be devoting an entire broadcast to debunk the Virgin of Guadalupe, and I'm going to lose a fair amount of Mexican friends. But I am going to refer to history as it is documented. The first coins were minted in New Spain by 1536. Indian slavery was outlawed on June 2nd by 1537, in which Pope Paul issued Sublimis Deus, which is a papal encyclical which was promulgated by the Pope, in which he said slaves are human beings too, whether we're talking about Indian slaves or Mexican Indian slaves or African slaves. They are real people, so you cannot have slaves in Mexico. Oppression gene, interesting. Oh, surely. Oh, my goodness. This is a fascinating topic of conversation, and I promised myself I wouldn't quote you during the presentation because I know that my animations go funny. Construction of Mexico City Cathedral begins in 1563. That is that gorgeous cathedral that you can see in Mexico City next to the Zócalo, and it was started in 1563. And it is shrinking along with downtown Mexico City between 2 and 30 centimeters per year. Remember, Mexico City, formerly known as Tenochtitlan, was built over a lake. The lake was eventually covered by all these chinampas, these semi-floating gardens, but even some of the ancient calzadas or lanes or throughways in Tenochtitlan are calzadas or streets that continue to be used in today's Mexico. There's a street in Mexico City called Calzada de Tlalpan, and this is the Tlalpan access to the city of Tenochtitlan. And you look at the maps from ancient Tenochtitlan, and you look at Calzada de Tlalpan, and you look at modern maps of Mexico, and the same street is there. But the fundamental fact is that Mexico City, at least the downtown area, was built over a muddy lake. And it is sinking. If you walk around Mexico City downtown, particularly if you walk around the Fine Arts Palace, the Palacio de Bellas Artes, you have to walk stairs down to get into the palace because the palace is so fucking heavy. It is sinking. And this business of sinking, 30 centimeters may not seem like a lot, but just imagine any construction where all of a sudden the foundations have disappeared or have gone down for 30 centimeters. It's really going to mess up your walls, let me tell you. Sinking, not shrinking. Well, excuse me. This is true, Linda Vasquez. It is sinking, not shrinking. It's actually not shrinking at all. The population continues to increase and not shrink. Thank you very much for that. Let's see. Chapultepec Castle was built in 1785. It was originally built as a summer house for the highest colonial administrator, considered as having been Mexico City's White House or National Palace for a long time. Today it is a beautiful museum, and I remember as a child going to my first classical music concerts, outdoor concerts there with my father. One of the few wonderful gifts he actually gave me. Resentful child spoken. The Mexican War of Independence begins, led by Catholic priest Miguel Hidalgo. We talked about this the other day, and this is the big meat and potatoes of the celebration that's coming up. This started on September 16, 1810, but it was not a business in which the Mexican War started, and boom, then it was over. The war actually continued until the year 1821. So it was a long and drawn battle full of all kinds of shady turns that we won't even have time to get into. Agustín de Iturbide becomes the first emperor of Mexico in 1822. So when we finally get past the independence, we still don't understand the difference between kings and queens and presidents. So the first emperor in Mexico was still of a royal kind. And he is also credited, Agustín de Iturbide, as the original designer of the first Mexican flag. Cue the chiles en nogada legend. Of course we cue it because it was one of the main legends about the creation of their story behind the creation of chiles en nogada is that Agustín de Iturbide, in previous years, he had just finished a battle and he was going through the state of Puebla with his troops. And these nuns decided, oh my God, here comes Agustín de Iturbide. We might as well throw a shindig. And what will he eat? Well, let's make him a patriotic dish that we're just going to invent that includes the green of the peppers, the white of the walnut sauce, and the red of the pomegranate. But that is just one of several legends behind the creation of chiles en nogada. We'll again dive into that separately in another segment. But there's some really awesome stories behind those chiles en nogada, but not today, not today. Today we're jumping really quickly. First Mexican president was Guadalupe Victoria. This happened in 1824. He was known for establishing diplomatic relations with the UK and the US, and he ratified the border with the United States. So he got together with the United States and said, oh, okay, guys, just so we're both on the same page, this is the border. And what was the border? Well, it included a lot of southern states, and you already know that, but if you don't, I'm going to refresh your memory. Because but in 1833, we get Antonio Lopez de Santana. He becomes president for the first time, and he is known as Mexico's favorite villain. Why? Because he let go of a lot of land in northern Mexico. He was an enigmatic, patriotic, and controversial figure who had great power in Mexico during 40 years of turbulence. And if you start, thank you very much, Mihal. If you start recognizing street names in history lessons, you know, it's because all these dudes, that's why we name our streets after them. Texas Revolution begins in 1835. And this consisted of a number of colonists from the United States and Tejanos, which were Texan Mexicans. They started feeling like, well, wait a second, the central government of Mexico is not to our liking, and it's not all that different from some of the dissension that is going on today between some Mexican states and the federal government. But of course, this was a lot more serious. So the Texas Revolution begins in 1835. The Mexican army led by Santana stormed north, and in the following year, and it was defeated by the Texans. Sam Houston comes into the picture in what is known as the Battle of San Jacinto, and this is when Texas declares its independence from Mexico, and it was the Republic of Texas for some time, its own country. Who knew? But then the Mexican-American War begins, 1846. The war ends the following year with the Treaty of Hidalgo. And of course, Santana had everything to do with this. And this is where the United States gains new territory, including California, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, not Utah. Utah, Utah, and Nevada. So this all happened in 1846. So you wonder why there's so much Mexican-American and Mexican stuff going on in those states? Now you know where we came from and where they came from. Santana is exiled from Mexico in 1857, and he goes to Cuba. Good luck, Cuba. And then, of course, the French invade Mexico. I mean, what is it with all these people? We have a beautiful country. Of course, they want to claim it their own. So the French invade Mexico in 1864, and they bring this dude called Maximilian of Austria, and he becomes our president. This was not actually the first the first French intervention. It was the second one. The first one took place earlier, 1838 and to 1839, and it is known as the Pastry War. Now that title is as interesting as Cinco de Mayo, and it sounds really fabulous, but it was just another conflict. Parenthetically, and before we get into the Battle of Puebla, and before we get into Cinco de Mayo, can I go back? Yes, I can go back. Parenthetically, it is known that when the French Revolution ended, um, a lot of French communities from Mexico City migrated into other states. And it is, I believe, and I've heard this from a number of places, that the town of Navidad near Mascota was a town where a lot of French people established. And if you go to Mascota today and you look at some of the physical profiles of the people that live there, you would think some of them come from Europe. And this has to do with all the families, the French families that migrated to this part of our state when things started getting ugly for them in Mexico City. Anyhow, the Battle of Puebla, Cinco de Mayo, 1862. This is the famous victory by Mexican forces over the French invaders. It was led in part by a dashing young general named Porfirio Diaz. And I bring this up because we have to talk about Porfirio Diaz. It is coming up very shortly. But before we get into that, Benito Juarez expels the French and becomes president in 1867. He was the 26th president in Mexico, but he is considered important because he was the first Mexican president of indigenous origin. His birthday, March 21st, is a national holiday in Mexico. Porfirio Diaz becomes president of Mexico on February 17, 1877, and remains in office for 31 years. This entire period is often referred to as the Porfiriato. Porfirio Diaz had two daughters, and he loved his eldest daughter. His eldest daughter was married to a nice Mexican gentleman, and I bring this up because this comes up in a little while. Jose Guadalupe Posada established his shop in Mexico City in 1900. Why do I bring this up? Because Jose Guadalupe Posada was a very important political lithographer who produced popular illustrations for many publications of the time. Whereas today we call upon a photographer to go photograph pieces for the news, Guadalupe Posada and people like him created engravings to feature in the papers of the time. And last but certainly not least, Jose Guadalupe Posada is the creator of the Catrina, which is this very iconic illustration that has turned into all kinds of things. We get to talk about La Catrina on a completely separate date because it is very, very important historically and certainly important during this time in which we're celebrating Mexican Independence Month. Oh my God, it's 11:27 and I'm still going at it. Stonewall, get out of the way. The first Mexican homosexual scandal happened on November 18th, 1901, in which 49 gay men were busted having a drag party in Mexico City. And who was there? None other than the Mexico president, Porfirio Diaz's son-in-law, the one that married his eldest daughter. His favorite daughter was there. And he was dressed up. And he was gay. And this is all very well documented. And this whole thing happened over 80 years prior to the Stonewall riots in the United States. The illustration that you see, of course it's not seen clearly, was one created by Jose Guadalupe Posada, Katrina guy. And this is a very fabulous queer part of our history, and it is about to become a movie that will be released later on this year. I have talked about this particular sordid scandal in the past. There is a blog entry on my website that you can take a look at if you want. But I wanted to bring this up because it's fabulously shady. Anyhow, the Mexican Revolution begins led by Emiliano Zapata, not led by Old Town, not led by South Side. It was led by Emiliano Zapata, and that is the name of the neighborhood, and that's why it is called Emiliano Zapata. It happened because Mexico's 1910 elections were a sham, and it was a sham designed to keep long-term dictator Porfirio Diaz in power. Let us also remember that there is historical evidence that the son-in-law that I mentioned before in the gay scandal had Emiliano Zapata working at his ranch for him, and some people suggest that there was more hanky-panky going on between Emiliano Zapata and the son-in-law of the president. Oh my God, Mexican shadiness. I love it. So, Porfirio Diaz, who ruled as a dictator for 35 years, ended up being overthrown on 1911. So the revolution had something good come out of it, and he was replaced by Francisco y Madero, another common name and another name of a street in Emiliano Zapata. He was a wealthy landowner, but he was still, regardless of that, an advocate for social justice and democracy. After that, Pancho Villa decides, well, I'm going to attack the United States. And this is something that was ordered by him. He sent 100 Mexican members of his group to make a cross border attack against Columbus, New Mexico. Why? Well, we'd have to dive into the history of Mexico, and it is very, very long and convoluted. We won't have time to go there. But please know that the first Mexican Constitution was adopted in 1917. We celebrate Constitution Day, and this is where the Constitution came from. Emiliano Zapata was murdered on the 10th of April 1919, which was a big priority for President Venustiano Carranza. The details of his death are very shady, and we're not going to get into them again because there's just so much to uncover. Pancho Villa was also assassinated. This happened in 1923. He had kind of a self-exile to his ranch, and to this day, there continues to be a lot of questions about who ordered him killed and why. The National Mexican Party, now known as the PRI, the Partido Nacional Revolucionario, was formed in 1929, and they would rule the Mexican government until the year 2000. What happened in 2000? We'll get to that. You'd never know this, but there was a Mexican army that went in on the Second World War and declared war on Germany and Japan. How many soldiers? Well, you're looking at them. But we were there. We were in World War II. Jump forward to October 1968, October 2nd, President Diaz Ordaz was in place, and we have the Tlatelolco massacre. This was a very sad, painful, and not yet forgotten aspect of Mexican history, in which thousands of Mexican civilians, many of them young students, were manifesting in the district of Tlatelolco in Mexico City to protest the government, and they were killed. Thousands of them. Hundreds? Thousands. I don't want to exaggerate, but this is one aspect of Mexican history that we've never healed from, because to this date, movies have been made, documentaries have been made, and it continues to be as relevant as, for example, the disappearing of the 42 Ayotzinapa students from a couple of years ago. It's one of those things that the government has never really been able to explain properly. And this happened just a few days before the Summer Olympics were being held in Mexico City. So the games were extremely turbulent. And they were extremely turbulent because there were some Romanian sports athletes that were disqualified by the Soviets. And of course, American athletes gave the Black Power salute. And obviously, there were riots going on north of the border. So this happened just after the riots. We're almost done. I know I'm going super long, but we're almost done. Just a couple more headlines. A huge 8.1 level earthquake hits Mexico City on 1985. Over 10,000 people were killed. The North American Trade Agreement, NAFTA, was signed with Canada and the United States in 1993. The impetus came from President Ronald Reagan, who made the idea part of his 1980 presidential campaign. I may have a typo there. And the last headline that I have for you for Mexico is that Vicente Fox, who now calls himself an influencer and charges money to sing you happy birthday, and as we have just realized, is about to become a Magnus Emporium owner of pot stores throughout Mexico, was elected Mexican president, becoming the first president not from the PRI to become a president in 71 years. And that brings us to the past decade. And this is the end of my slightly shortened, somewhat shady history of Mexico. And that was the end. Woof! We survived that. Anyhow, that brings us to the end of today's Coffee and Headlines. As always, it is a pleasure to put things together for you. And of course, this is relevant because some of these little glimpses are stuff that we're going to continue to take closer looks during our rest of the month. I see a lot of comments coming from you. Thank you very much for your compliments. And yes, absolutely, Lorraine comments that winners write history, and there is a lot of that in Mexico going on. Bam, ba-dum, bam, 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 bam. Thank you very much for the nice comments. Thank you very much for the nice comments. Thank you very much for sticking around. And thank you very much for appreciating all the hard work that goes into producing these segments. And speaking of that, you can always show us some support and some love by buying us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/ojedapaco. Again, this is a labor of love, but it is very time consuming. If you find yourselves enjoying what goes on here, remember that it is a time consuming labor. For Luna, for most of the part, I only sit around and just look at her getting busy. So if you enjoyed today's broadcast, feel free to buy us a coffee on Coffee and Headlines, or better yet, become a member of our community. It is always appreciated. That's the end of our broadcast today. I hope you have great weekend plans for yourselves for today, tomorrow, and Sunday. We will go back tomorrow. We will come back tomorrow, as always, with more headlines and more stories. In the meantime, please stay healthy, stay kind, stay happy, stay safe, stay well informed, and stay in touch. Have a super day.